All right, hello everyone. My name is Erin Kress, and today I'm going to be talking about and giving a presentation on open source for my IITM 2000 class. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover quite a few things, but I'm going to cover what open source actually is, why open source is important. I'm going to give a brief history of open source and how it's used today and how kind of we got to where we are. Then I'm going to talk about the impact and the advantages that open source gives. And then I'm going to give some real life examples that you would kind of encounter in your everyday life. After that, I'm going to discuss a little bit of where I see the future of open source going. And then that will conclude this presentation. So first and foremost, what is open source? The term open source, it refers to something that people can modify and they can share it because it's designed to be publicly accessible. So if something is open source, it means that it's freely available for its users to use and modify. And then the users of that can take what they have modified and then they can distribute their own copies of their own versions of it. So why is this important? By removing barriers and having different softwares that is open for modification, open source it supports the exchange of different ideas, and it drives the creativity and it advances different scientific and technological programs and advancements. So open source projects have the benefit of having a really diverse network of people, and they're all contributing to one project. And it drives that project forward, and it allows for a lot of different points of view. So history. I'm going to be going through 5 important points in open source history that kind of lead to where we are now. And these 5 points have been, there's a lot of different advancements that have taken place over the year, but these are the 5 things that have really hit home and they've evolved open source into what it is today. So the first important thing was RMS and the printer. So in the late 1970s, Richard M. Stallman, RMS, was a staff programmer at MIT, and his whole department shared one computer and one printer. So with so many different computers or people sending things to the printer, the paper would regularly jam up, and it would cause a bunch of print jobs just kind of pile up in the queue until someone would eventually go and fix the problem. So the MIT staff and RMS, Richard M. Stallman, came up with this hack. So they wrote their own code for the printer so that every time it jammed, a message would be sent to the person using that computer, and they'd say, "The printer is jammed, please fix it." So now they would realize in real time what was happening, so they wouldn't wait for 10, 20, 15 minutes to go get their print job and see that they're backed up all the way in the queue and it's been jammed for hours. They're actually getting it in real time and it's saying, "The printer is jammed, please fix it." So when the printers were replaced, Stallman asked for the code so he could reinstall the hack that they created. The people installing for the printer, they told him no because it was proprietary information and they signed the DNRs. And he was really upset with this. So he decided to create a complete operating system that would not deprive the users of the freedom to understand how it works. So basically, this would allow them to make changes. And this was kind of the birth of the free software movement. And the second important moment was the creation of GNU. So Stallman, the same guy with the printer, created GNU, and it was his version of Unix, but it would give total freedom to users. He published a paper called the GNU Manifesto, and this kind of ended up being the founding charter of the free software movement. So the third important moment in history was the writing of GPL. Until about 1989, software written and released by Free Software Foundation and RMS, it did not have one single license. So the first version of the GNU General Public License was released in 1989, and it summarized the values of copyleft. So it's kind of a pun instead of copyright, copyleft. So it's the opposite. So you could copy, you could distribute, and you could modify this software that covered the license. That was all covered by this license. So if you made changes, it said in this that you had to share the modified source code alongside with the modified binaries. So this requirement in combination with the internet is what made the free software movement. This is really what made it flourish. So, and then the next milestone I want to cover is the publishing of the Cathedral and the Bazaar. So what this did is this work compared and contrast the development and the structure of the GCC to the Linux kernel. It also talked about, so the writer also talked about his own experience with this bizarre development model. And long story short, this essay has been credited by bringing free software to a broader audience. At first, it was kind of just to the tech savvy of that generation. Not a lot of people, the everyday person wouldn't know what it was. But this really kind of was started to bring it to people's attention. So you didn't just have to be someone who was really in the technical field to understand and to hear about this. So Raymond was involved, the person who published and wrote this, was involved in the coining of the term open source. And that was he also in the creation of the Open Source Institute. And the final big moment in history that I'm going to touch on is the corporate investment. So in 1999, IPOs of VA Linux and the Red Hat had the huge increases in, so once they started having publicly trading stocks in their first day, they had this huge increase in the prices of their stocks. And they were both, and this proved that open source was mainstream and it was a big deal and people were profiting off of this. And then later that year, IBM announced that they were going to support Linux by investing $1 billion in its development. So this made it a lot less risky for people to use. In the next year, Sun Microsystems released the source code to the STAR office, and then they created the openoffice.org project. So once the big corporations got behind this and really put in the funding, and also it got the attention of the Wall Street. So whenever the big companies like IBM kind of got behind this and started investing, then people really started to kind of adopt it and look a lot into it and kind of put it into their business model. So now I'm going to talk about open source today and some of the new developings and projects that have happened very recently. So first, I'm going to talk about OpenQ. And OpenQ, so Google and Sony partnered together to release this. And what it is, according to them, is it's an open source high-performance render manager specifically built for the needs of the visual effects in the animation industry. So this originally started with Sony, and now they've partnered with Google, and they're going to apply it to the cloud platform and kind of put some of those processes in the cloud. Next is the Linux Foundation. They released LF Edge, and they call this an umbrella organization to establish an open interoperable framework for the edge computing independent of hardware, silicon, cloud, or operating system. So this project includes a bunch of things, but it's basically an open source software kind of for high availability and cloud services, different IT and tools that'll help in that. Okay, and then next is the Neo AI. So Amazon just announced the release of this new project, And what it's doing is it's trying to optimize the performance of machine learning models. And the motivation for this is to provide different capabilities to edge devices they're often constrained, but they're trying to kind of make it easier, and they're targeting devices to make them more optimizable. So the impact and advantages. So there's quite a few different impacts and advantages, but I think the 6 main ones are flexibility and agility, speed, cost effectiveness. So with this, whenever it's open source, it's very flexible because a lot of different people can kind of put their input and their view into a project. And then it kind of speeds things up. It makes, because you have so many different people on one project, kind of just free to adapt it and modify it, you can get things done faster. And it's also cost effective it's free and modifiable, and you don't have to pay for the software and put it on every single computer. It's very easily accessible, so it makes it more cost effective. And then it also has solid information security, and it attracts better talent because it's so mainstream. And I think a lot of people, they enjoy creating their own projects and having the ability to interact with others outside of just their general circle. It kind of attracts a different type of person, and they usually tend to be more creative and kind of very talented. And then solid information security. Open source has pretty solid security in a record of a dangerous world with a lot of people hacking nowadays. They have a really good security on their side. And then some examples that you would probably run into on your everyday life of some different types of open sources. So Firefox, Chrome, OpenOffice, Android. And then an example of 2 more, WordPress, which is the world's or the US's biggest blog space. They give you, so it's modifiable and shareable. So you create your own blog through this, and then you can share it to your own audience. And then Linux, a big one, or Linux. And then an example of something that's not open source would be something like Microsoft Windows. So every computer that you put it on, you have to purchase the software, download it, and you can't share it unless somebody has that same software. So you can't just send it to someone. Like a Google Docs would be it's free to use. You just need to make a free account, and then multiple people can work on it at one time. But with Microsoft Office and Windows, Excel, you have to have that purchased and downloaded on your computer to share it. And then those people also have to have it on their computer. So the future of open source. So where I see this going, because it's so broad and so with technical advancements, you never really know where it's going, but it has a very bright future. It will definitely continue to accelerate with the more people using it every day. It's really integrated into our everyday lives, especially different business models. I think it's gonna play an even larger role and unique business logic layered on top of it. So it's really going to be integrated into these different businesses, and I think it'll be a key resource on the day-to-day life. So I think there's going to be a bunch of different open source tools that will be created in the next few years. And I think all of this is going to happen at a pretty rapid space, or really rapid time frame, because we already have such a kind of foundation for open source now. People and what they're able to do today is just amazing. So I definitely think all of this is going to happen very fast. And then the next thing is innovation. So I think open source will be a key driver of innovation. Different tools that'll help, like machine learning and making them more capable with different enterprises and businesses. I think we'll continue to see a lot of that. I think this will create, because it's so many people can get together and work on one thing, a lot of people are going to get this will keep happening. So people will come together and they'll kind of put their ideas together and really create technology that is going to be really great. And I think that lost my place. And I also think that this is going to be something that will always exist. I think in the near future, or maybe within the 50 years, things like Microsoft Office, Excel, they're not really going to be used anymore because they're really not efficient. And then just kind of a conclusion on what we went through. So we covered a lot, but basically what we went over is what open source actually is, why it's important, the history that made it what it is today, what open source actually looks like today, what they're doing, the different companies that are pairing together and coming up with new projects, and then the impact and advantages that open source has. We went over some real life examples of different softwares and companies that use it that you're very likely to run into. And finally, we talked about the future of open source, what it looks like, the different innovations that it's definitely going to keep growing, and it's going to be really something to look at in the next few years. And then that's the end of my presentation. That's all I have. So thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from this presentation, and have a great day.